Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I'm uh, I'm glad y'all here. Just realized I didn't turn my phone off. We just hope don't nobody call me. Um, one of my very first experiences with suicide. I was a little kid, and we were gonna go down to Mississippi to visit because we needed to go to a funeral of my most beautiful aunt. And when I say that, I mean inside and out. And um, the adults were whispering, and the kids, let me just speak for myself. The adults were whispering, and I had overheard that she had taken pills. And by the time they found her, it was almost too late. And then when they took her to the hospital, she died. I don't believe she had made it to 20. And it's interesting because when I do have lots of somatic empathy. And so when I feel pressure in my chest, I know that I am, trying to understand, like with the body, what's going on with someone else. And it wasn't until 2 years ago that I actually got some insight into what happened. And I don't think that part is what matters. But one of the things that just hasn't landed on me well this week in finding out about Twitch was that um, my PR people are like, yeah, don't touch it, don't talk about it. I wrote an article about moods anyway, because we do not know how to, and when I say we, I'm talking just the collective in general. We don't know how to recognize our emotions, understand those emotions, label them, and then be able to we don't have the ability sometimes to be able to express them, either because we won't or because other people won't be open to it. And all of those steps are necessary in order for us to regulate our emotions. And oftentimes at the beginning of a leadership class, I'll ask people kind of what's the one word for their mood, and I can guarantee you, um, with almost 100% certainty, that no one will say any of the blue emotions. If it's a small group, maybe. um, if it's not virtual, maybe. But to express sadness and grief and loss, depression, those are not things that people typically will want to share. And what I try to do is that when I feel blue emotions, I try to say, you even have heard me say things here to try to normalize it so that people feel like they can express, recognize, understand, label. Um, I try to share that I have a therapist and that I've had a therapist for a really long time in some capacity. We ain't gonna talk about how Stacy fired me, and so then I had to find me another therapist. But I think it helps to do that because people then will say, they'll ask me, what's the name of my therapist? Can I help them find a black therapist? Things like that. But one of the troubling things for me this week was that people keep saying, if you're feeling some kind of way, reach out. And I don't know, it reminded me of the time when I was having seriously depressive thoughts, when my grief had turned into thoughts of death after my mother died. Yeah, I wasn't calling nobody, not no regular person. And I wrote about this in the book, The Holy Educated MFer, because my primary reason for not wanting to call folk was because I felt like most of the people in my space were going to say, you should just pray. Like, let's pray. I know how to pray. I pray all day, every day, all the time, about everything. Let me be late, child. Be like, Lord Jesus, help me be on time. Pray about everything. When your mind fails you, prayer is not what you. And I love Jesus. Um, but what I think is important for people to understand is that therapy, like I can just say to my therapist, be like, hey, how you doing? my therapist would be like, what's the primary emotion you got today? And I can say something like, I don't know. And he's so skilled at what he does that he knows how to walk me through the steps in order to be able to make progress on whatever it is I need to do. And usually the challenge is that I haven't been eating real food. I've probably been eating too much. I probably haven't been eating enough plants. I probably haven't been outside in the sun. I probably been on my device too much. I probably ain't been um, getting my cardio in. I mean, there's some things that you do to make sure that your mind is well. In fact, I remember when my friend said that that someone in her family was suffering from dementia, and we were like looking up to see what could prevent you from having dementia. Eating real food, not too much, mostly plants, getting sun, exercising, moving the body. And Dr. Michelle Robin wrote a book, and right now the like something small things. If you know the title, you can share with me, because it typically is not these major things. Sometimes people need medication, but most of the time it's like I can't even tell you what my mood is most times until it has gotten to so extreme that I don't know how to regulate. I got a gift in the mail from the Dream Studio. Y'all know the folks over at the Dream Studio? This is from Shane Evans. This one says, "This is my floating like a butterfly and stinging like a bee face. Rumble, young man, rumble." He writes a lot of children's, not writes, he designs a lot of children's fiction books that are culturally responsive. And if you haven't checked out the folks over at Dream Studio or any of the books that Shane has designed, I think you should. Um, but my question and my challenge for you this week, and one that I think maybe I could get some help on. I appreciate y'all for reaching out and telling me what you think your solutions were for this situation that I'm having with this preacher. We're meeting tomorrow morning, 8:30. I will follow back up and let y'all know how it go. But I thought it was really important for me to try to empathize with him in a moment to understand like what he was going through. And yes, I know I could just ask, but sometimes when we are so far removed from what somebody else is experiencing, it's really hard for us to show up in that conversation in ways that are going to be fruitful. Yesterday, I was at a session, and I understand that I've got some people who watch this Filter Free Friday just for the purposes of going back and telling other people. And Sugar, I want you to know that you should feel no shame about that. I'm not judging it in any way, shape, or form. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. I make sure that they're public. So if you don't have to tell anybody, you can show them the video. And if they want to talk to me about it, I'm happy to even go live to have a conversation about anything I said. So no shame, no blame, no judgment here. Feel free to always go back and tell people what I said. I almost lost my train of thought. I needed to be able to understand where he was coming from so that the conversation will be fruitful tomorrow. I really want to listen for the purpose of understanding. But when I'm operating from my lens, it's really hard to get there. And so yesterday, I'm sitting in a session, and I think I've told you all about this too, where oftentimes I am in a room full of people who are very culturally competent, but when they hear something that is subtle racism, they're silent. And one of the primary reasons they say they're silent is because by the time they recognize that we've moved on, they feel uncomfortable. They're concerned about their own job, So yesterday, there were several things that were said, but they weren't egregious enough for me to raise my hand and challenge and be competitive in the way that I normally am. Which on 2023, I'm gonna work on that. I'm working on that. I'll clarify and I'll get it together. But anyway, local mayor of a small town here in the Kansas City metro area. The conversation was about systemic racism, and this lovely gentleman, with all of his opportunity and access and power and ability to know better, pivoted the conversation towards, well, those children, and he even used the word those children just need somebody to go into the school and help them with the resumes. And those children just, I don't know what's going on with the guns and the violence. And those children just need somebody to show them what is possible. And those teachers who are helping those children just need to come up here to our area of town and watch how teachers do it right. My hand goes up, and my hand goes up, and my that thing that I feel in my chest when I was telling you about my auntie's suicide is the same thing that happens in my chest when I'm the one who's speaking up. I think it's interesting that people think taking a leadership role on anti-racism and hatefulness and exclusion is something that you're like, woohoo, sign me up. I feel good about it. I can't wait. That's not what happens. I want to be liked. I want people to like me. I want to be perceived as kind and empathetic. After all, I'm trying to launch an empathy revolution, no less. So I ask a question first. Sir, we are talking about systemic racism, specifically redlining and its impact on educational facilities and everything else. Can you help me understand how you get to resume building? And he started hemming and hawing, and I'm like, no, 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 no. It is not the children's fault in any school district in the Kansas City metro area or any metropolis for that matter that we have systemically, many times with incredible amounts of racial terror and hatred. And here in the state of Missouri, we even refused funding for school districts until the 80s and had to be forced to fund schools by the federal government. And there was an exodus of white families into Catholic schools all of a sudden because of integration. And yes, I know we're talking about something that happened 50 years ago, but we are directly experiencing the outlay of that today. And when I said it, I don't know if you know me, but I just speak. There was no heat. It was just, I'm not going to raise the tenor of my voice. I'm not going to put pillows around it. That is implicit racial bias for you to make that connection to say that it is the children's fault, and it is not their fault. We need to figure out it is not enough to continue to say, oh, redlining, we can't believe we did that and we don't know how to fix it. Well, I can tell you one way it's hard to fix it when you are benefiting from it. Of course, it's hard to fix it. We can't come up with solutions. But here's the thing. I think sometimes people want me to want them to speak up in the same way that I do. I've been an extrovert my whole life. All my friends are introverts. All. I do not expect that actually. But what I would appreciate is that when I take the courageous step to speak up, that you would then at least be like, that's right. Or, yes, thank you. I'm so glad you said something in the moment. This thing, Mrs. Theresa Bird and I had a conversation about this last night at the Ad Hoc Group Against Crime holiday party. This thing that happens when after the event is over that you want to come and talk to me about how you're glad I spoke up. It just feels delayed and late, and it just reminds me of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's quote. It's not the action of our enemies that's our challenge, it is the silence of our friends. And when you speak to me even after the event, that silence is what I feel and struggle with. And that's what I feel in my chest. And in this room of people for whom I believe half of the folks understood exactly what I was saying, it was time to go after this comment was made. Folks wouldn't look me in the eye. They're avoiding my area of the table. When I go to try to talk to the mayor afterwards, all of a sudden he gets a phone call. Then when his phone call's over, then he's got to go to the bathroom. Then when he's done going to the bathroom, then he got to go get a drink. And then all of a sudden he ends up at a different table. Sir, I'm not going to follow you around to try to help you understand the racist ideas that you hold in your heart that are coming out of your mouth explicitly, which means that you consciously believe them and you have positional power to do something different. And I say all that to say, when we are ignorant on the topic, and I say we because I mean me too, we have a responsibility, regardless of if that is mental health, regardless of if that is race and racism, regardless of that's any other social ill for which we're going to speak on. Now, I don't think you need to learn about everything in the world, but if you're going to speak on it, at least try to understand and know what it is you're talking about. At least try to understand and know. There are many things for which I do not know. And in those moments, the answer is I don't know. I was got an opportunity to hear about the Kansas City International Airport that the new terminal is opening in March. And one thing that I was excited about is that they have all gender restrooms. They have ones for women, ones for men, one for people who are gender non-binary or who, just non-gendered bathrooms. And the way that this person explained how he got support was that the city had asked that, you know what, make the airport as accessible as possible. And in making the airport accessible as possible, he said, when I go to the airport and I got my parents with me and both of them are elderly, I don't want to have to go to the one bathroom with my dad and stand outside and make sure he's okay, and then send my mother into the bathroom by herself or have to find a family bathroom somewhere to use. I can go to the gender neutral bathroom. Both my parents can go into the stalls that go from floor to ceiling so that they have privacy. And I can be like, Mom and Dad, I'll be out here when you get done. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is a really good example of how designing for people who need it the most helps everyone. He also gave an example of what if you have preteen children and let's say you have a boy and a girl and you don't, let's say you're the dad, you can't go with your daughter, she can't go in with you. What do? This gender neutral bathroom works perfect in these situations. And because we designed it for trans people, it helps everyone, which takes me to the point I've been trying to make all day. When we are considering how we're going to engage with people on topics, and when I say we, y'all, I'm talking about me too. What if we thought about our words as if our words were going to be the last ones that made a person decide whether or not they should end it all or not? And if so, would we respond that way? Would we say it that way? The curb cut. Thank you, Mrs. Bird. We designed ramps and sidewalks for people with wheelchairs. It makes it so that people in wheelchairs can get up on the curb without issue. But we all use the curb cut. Maybe because we've got strollers, or maybe because we're using a bike, or maybe because we had luggage and we don't want to go around. But the ramp in the sidewalk, yes, does it cost us a little more? Probably. Yes, does it make some more design decisions we have to make? Absolutely. But designing for the neediest has helped everyone. And so I want you to join me together to be empathy revolutionaries, to think about, if I'm designing my words, if I'm designing my post, if I'm thinking about my sermon for the person who needs reassurance and help and someone to care about them the most, how would I say it? 2023, that's going to be me. Because here's what I know for sure. Dorothy Ann Brown did not have that. And I never got to meet her in the way that I wanted to, because in an effort to end her pain, she decided to end her life. I've been there, and you don't know who else has been there. And because we don't know, in the absence of information, let us choose kindness. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.